So it sounds like you've had a really positive experience with your improv and obviously with Kim's Convenience. I mean, have you faced any significant challenges and how have you coped with it?
Challenges personally, I think, especially with my improv career and comedy career, I think there were lots of bad shows and it's a lot of questioning my skill and ability. And I think that to me is the most difficult part of having an artistic career, the self-doubt.
Mhm.
And I think that if you when you're a colored artist, you already have a bit more of a difficult battle because there's just like less space for you to be. And so for me, fighting for that space, fighting for that stage time, there's a lot of moments where just like I didn't feel good. And to be truthful, like early on in my improv career, I didn't get a lot of stage time. Like it was really great when I did, but like there were other kids that were better than me. And so I struggled with that. And it wasn't until I was able to put myself on stage that my work was better. I'm actually realizing that now. Like early on, what I was trying to be what I thought would be funny.
Mhm.
Whereas when I let myself slip on stage, the funny naturally came. It was more effortless, right? The funny was just like I would just like say something and it was real and honest, and that would be funny. And I'm like, oh, I got to remember that. But I think that was the struggle early on. It was just like questioning myself. There were some people who didn't believe in me. Like I comment a lot. Like my best friend at the time was like, Andrew, there's no Asian actors. There's, this is not going to happen. And I always bring that up in interviews, and he always comments, "Dude, stop bringing that up." I'm like, "No, man, you said it. You got to own those words."
Yeah.
Um,
Eat your
but
words, really.
yeah, yeah. But that's the struggle early on. Your doubt, but that's anything. That's anything.
Absolutely.
Anything you stop and you're like, "Man, I suck at this." Being a parent, being a sibling, being a partner, being a spouse, you say those things, and so I think it's like getting over that. I think career wise, um, and I've mentioned it. It was like when at first representation was like, okay, let's just cast a bunch of colored people. But I'm like, you have to think like when you're creating these characters, and if you don't write them for a specific ethnicity, you're kind of doing it a disservice. You're not clear on it. Just to say, oh, we wrote this best friend, it could be any color. I'm like, I don't know if it could, right? And I think that's a dangerous thing. You're just putting Lego pieces in. And I don't think that's the right thing. I think you should write roles that, or you should write these characters with a certain person in mind, right? And I think we're seeing that evolve in the industry because when I read
Right.
Kimchee, it broke down Kimchee's character, and I was like, oh, this is the best. So I think we're seeing that overcome now, but it is still tough. Like even like I still will see auditions come through. It'll be like, oh, doctor, waiter. And I'm like, no, I'm not auditioning for that. You don't even got a name for this person? I don't want to audition for that.
Yeah.
Right. But it makes me happy when I start to see names and characters associated with people. I'm also really fortunate because my parents were pretty supportive of my career. And here's the thing. I did a degree in business and economics, and I had full intentions of being a lawyer. Full intentions. I was going to do economics, work 2 years in oil and gas, go into law. Pretty foolproof plan. My mom was on board. But somewhere in those 2 years, I was like, I just did more and more improv, and I pushed off law school, and then I pushed off my MBA. But then I remember inviting my mom to one of my sold out improv shows. And then I did a scene where I got the improvisers on stage to play my parents and for them to improvise their first date together. But I
That's so
remember
cute.
I put the spotlight on my mom and dad, and I was asking them questions. And my mom stood up and she waved at the crowd like she was like a king. She's like, "Oh, you are all watching me now. I'm important." She loves it. And then after that show, they were really supportive. And I remember I had made a movie with my friends and we entered it to some film festivals. And my mom and dad were like, you should keep doing this.
Mm.
And so when I quit my job to do it full time, I got no pushback. Um, so I am fortunate to have had really, really caring and thoughtful Asian parents but they also saw how hard I was working. And I would do this thing where I made an Excel spreadsheet where at the bottom of each month, it listed how much I made as a salary. And then the cell before that, I listed how much I made as an artist that month. And my goal was to never go under that other number. And I never did. If I was short
amazing.
$50, I go hustle that $50. And so they've been my biggest fans, honestly. Like when my mom flies Air Canada, she'll go around the plane and start telling people to watch Kim's Convenience because it's on the Air Canada
free
plane.
Free PR.
She's so good at it. We were having dim sum months ago, and some people came up to get a photo, and my mom was like, "That's okay. He take photo with you. Okay, come." She's waving at people to come to take photos with me, right? Like she's like now my manager. And then finally my wife, I've dated my wife, like much like you. We've been together for 15 years now.
Be careful. You're being recorded. So
I'm being recorded. Yeah. 15 years now. And to have a partner who had nothing to do with the arts, I could just come home and tell her I had a bad show and she wouldn't try to fix it because it's not her world. She would just listen. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I think that what you're speaking to is really having supportive people around you, because it makes so much difference when you're doing new things and maybe things that other people don't understand.
Yeah. Like I think the more supporters you could have, the better. And the more you recognize your needs. But like, I think I'm also like, I think improv has taught me to live in the moment and to be hyper aware of what's happening. And I will say that like, I think I'm very good at setting up my boundaries. So like in 2012, I hosted the Calgary Stampede, which is, if you don't know, it's like the biggest like rodeo in the world. And it's 10 days of like a carnival, but it's like massive. And I hosted a stage there. I did 12 shows a day. I'd go out and hype that crowd up of like 2,000 people every show, 12 shows. And I remember after like the third or fourth show, I sat in my dressing room in a trailer and like I just sat in a corner in the dark. And the stage manager came around. He's like, "Andrew, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good. But I feel like if I don't sit like this, my head's going to explode." And he's like,
"A lot of
cool.
Stimulus like around you."
Yeah, it's like you go out and those lights and you're all in. So I remember like every show, every show, 12 shows a day for 10 days, I went to the trailer and I sat in the corner just like silently. I put on some music. I'd bring a book. I would like text with my wife. I just would like do nothing. I would do like mundane, simple things, but that's like how I handle it. And I do that on Kim's Convenience. Any movie I've made, any TV show I do, when they say, "Oh, Andrew, we're like, you're on a break," I will just go sit in my dressing room like silently, And it's just, I think knowing that boundary, knowing that's how I work makes me better. Because if I'm on all the time, we've seen it with like people like Chris Farley is a really good example, SNL. Yeah. Chris Farley was on all the time. But what ended up happening was he needed to cope some way. And that cope became a drug and alcohol addiction. And it's a very common thing with comedians. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was like sitting in the corner. And I don't know how this podcast is being shown, but like behind me is a wall of sneakers. That is how I deal with it. Also, like I'll go on my phone and just like look at sneaker review videos or I'll go on sneaker forums and try to trade for sneakers. And it's just like a thing that's not my job that like I can just like creatively enjoy. There's no stakes to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the more I've been able to really figure out my boundaries and limits and requirements as a human and as a performer, and just like ask for those things. Say I need a break.
And self-care is what you're saying. Like sitting in a corner may sound isolating, but at the same time, like that's what you need.
It is what I need. And I tell people, I'm like, I'm not hurting anybody. Like, why does it bother you if I'm sitting in a corner? Like, I ain't doing it. I'm sitting in a corner. I'm here. You need me to perform? I'll go perform. But like, yeah, I love it. And my wife and I, we often like, cause we're in pandemic. So we often like, we're like, what are we going to do when we get a vacation? And I'm like, hear me out. We get a hotel, we don't do anything. Like that's it. Our actually Christmas gift to each other was solo hotel days.
Those
So
are so important, by the way.
right. Oh yeah. So my wife went to a hotel for 2 days. I had the kids at home. We did our thing, and I was like, don't even text. Just like, or text whenever you need to, but like, don't even worry about us. And she got 2 days alone where she just like hung out in a hotel, watched movies, and we have to do that for ourselves. We have to know our limits because that's when we burn out.
Absolutely.
It is chasing and hustling is no good when you are not in the right mental state to enjoy it.
I'm so glad you said that. And also, you post really cute pictures of your kids. I have 2 daughters myself. But what has becoming a father, being a father, how has it helped you in terms of your acting or your creative arts?
Well, I think from like a personal standpoint, becoming a father has given me a lot of purpose. Like now when I take a project, I take it because I want to do it. Whereas I think before I took it because I'm like, oh, it's going to pay some money
Sure.
or it's going to sound fun. But now it's like when I take a project, I got to know I'm on board. So I am more thoughtful in the projects I choose because I know it's going to take me away from my family. So if it takes me away from my family, is it worth it?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very thoughtful.
Great way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I had to be hyper conscious about what I put my family through. And that was a difficulty of the first 2 seasons of Kim's Convenience because I shot that show with them living in Calgary and I shot that show in Toronto. So I would move to Toronto for 4 months and I would try to go home every 3 weeks for a couple days. And that was crushing me. Yeah. So going into the third season, I said to my wife, I'm like, I think we have to move. And we moved and we went all in on Toronto. We tried to make Toronto such a welcoming space for the boys. And now it's home to us. But it was like just being aware of like what you put your family through. So when I take a project, I'm aware of it now. In regards to my work, I think from the acting side of things, I think like the skill is separate. Like that's for me taking classes and watching performers and like watching shows and being a nerd, like being such a nerd of comedy, like that helps in that way. But I think being a father, I just mentioned about how we have ways of coping. Well, one of my ways of coping, from a long day is just like literally reading my kids' stories. And hanging out with them, wrestling with them, doing arts. And I love coloring with them. I love doing arts and crafts with them. So selfishly, it's given me another outlet to find calm. And they're not always calm.
No.
Kids are not always calm. No. But it's given me another outlet, another purpose outside of acting. It's given me something that I do that isn't being, that isn't my it is my job, but it's not my job,
It's eye-opening. It changes you. And I feel in a good way because it makes you think about other people in a different way and not just be in your hustle 24/7.
Yeah. Being a father is like, it's just, I love it because I got best friends. Like they're my best friends, and I love bringing them joy and giving them joy, and so, and I'm also happy that I made being a father part of like my brand, my image. Like I hate using the word brand, but I love when people like look at me and they're like, good father. And I'm like, cool. Like that's a really good thing, right? Like instead of them looking at me and being like horrible human being, they'll be like, they look at me and they're like, oh, he seems like a really fun dad. I'm like, because I think I am. And so I'm happy that like it's a reflection of who I am. But yeah, I think just from a career standpoint and mental health standpoint, they've made me be more selective of my work, and they just bring a sense of calm and they give me a sense of purpose. So I know everything I do, I am doing for them. And the other day, 2 days ago, I dropped off my older son at school, and he's in grade 1, and a bunch of kids ran up and they're like, are you on TV? My mom and dad watch your show. And then my son like went over and he was just like, my dad's on a lot of TV shows. And he was so proud. And I was like, it made me feel happy that he was proud, because I'm actually like, this is a negative side of things. I'm actually always so consciously worried that like us being out and being recognized bothers him,
Mm,
because it's happened where we're like out somewhere, we're like at an amusement park, we're trying to go out to a ride, and
sure.
someone stops me and he's like, Dad, let's go. And I'm like, hey, I'm really sorry. I'm with my son. And I always feel bad about that, because I'm always like, I'm always worried that he will resent that Dad had to leave.
Sure.
But it's part of it. And when Dad's here, he's here, and when he's gone, he's got to go to work. And hey, that's the reality of parents.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's justification or whatnot, but I definitely think that kids, if they see their parents working hard too, it gives them that model that it's not just all fun and games. While I'd like to make, my home, and it's so fun. It's so loud in here. And I'm glad you're not hearing too much, but I have a zoo. Like I have my mom, the 3 dogs, the 2 kids, like it's
Yo, you
never a
got
dull moment.
dogs?
3 dogs, and they're all seniors, by the way. So,
Is dogs a California a West Coast Asian thing?
I mean, people have dogs here, and I think Vic's parents, being Vietnamese, are like, in Vietnam, if you had dogs, you're rich because you would have,
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah. So we've had them before the kids, and so they've always been a part of our lives. So, I mean, many of my friends have dogs, so maybe it is a West Coast Asian thing.
I always try to like, because like I think like we talk a lot about like Asians do this, Asians do that. I'm like, no, they don't. Like Asians do whatever they want. And that was one of the criticisms early of Kim's Convenience. Like if people loved the show, they loved it. But there's always one hater. They're like, well, that's not how Asian people act. And I'm like, wait, did you just say that's not how Asian people act? Like, think about that. That means you took your Asian experience or your knowledge of the Asian experience and summed it up with one family. Like, that's not cool. But in my family in Calgary, 13 siblings on my mom's side, so 13 aunts and uncles, no one had a dog. So I've always been like, when I see Asian families with dogs, I'm like, interesting. Was it just my family that didn't have dogs?
No, my parents were not. I've always had fish, and so when I went to college, like I wanted a dog, and so I finally got one. But I think definitely the older generation, it wasn't a thing for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. I always try to find. I also look for differences between like American Asians and then like Calgary, Alberta Asians. Like I'm like, there's always these like subtle differences. But like I always commented that like I always felt like California, West Coast Asians were like they had Paris by Night, which is like a Vietnamese concert series.
I heard that every morning when I lived with my in-laws.
Oh, but they say Peri Parai, Peri Parai.
Yeah, it still pops up on my YouTube, and I'm like, what the hell? This is not my recommendation.
Well, I got my parents, I got them on my YouTube Plus this last year. And so my mom, like, I don't think I think it was top 5 moments she's been proud of me. And it was like, she's like, I could watch Betty Panay, no commercial. And she just was so happy. And or like when we lived in Calgary, she would babysit the kids and I'd come home, and you're right, all my suggestions would be Paris by Night videos now.
Yeah, I was like, where's my BTS stuff? And why are you saving these recipes on my BTS playlist? Like, I don't want to make Bundanung.
But my dad got mad at me when I put him on my YouTube Plus. He's like, no, don't pay for me. It's such a waste. I don't want it. Literally a month later, for some reason he got kicked out of his account and he forgot his password, and he called me. He's like, son, I need to log back in. I can't go back to that life. And I'm like, I told you, Dad, you worked so hard. Let me pay for your YouTube Plus. And it was the best. He's like, I can't go back to that. Yeah, but anyways, yeah, I always kind of look for the subtleties between Asians, from wherever they are in North America, because I think we settle in pockets, and we've kind of developed our own culture within a culture.
Absolutely. And I went to grad school actually in Northern Virginia. So it was really interesting because I had grown up in this bubble, the Bay Area. Our college was like an hour away from San Francisco, our home. And so it wasn't like we went far from home. But when we moved to Virginia, it was interesting because it was mostly Vietnamese and Korean, and we didn't know anyone there. So it was like trying to connect with, and it's diverse in Northern Virginia because we're also near DC, but it definitely has a different feel than the Bay Area.
Yeah, I think that's like it'll be interesting to see as we document more of our Asian culture to see the differences with even within America, even within Canada. Because I know like Vancouver Asians are very different. Like there's differences between Vancouver Asians and like Calgary Asians.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way we settle and we create our own communities, how we grow that way, how recipes evolve. Because like I'm sure recipes, when they land in that area of the country, they actually pick up little elements of that area. Because I always say that like Alberta Vietnamese food, the beef there, because we have Alberta beef, is like unreal. Like beef dishes in Alberta, like I crave. Whereas sometimes in Toronto, if I order like a beef Vietnamese dish, I'm a bit underwhelmed, but I'm like, I think it's the beef. Yeah. The beef isn't as good, right?
It's a game changer, and no egg roll is created equal. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Speaking of which, I've been trying to bug my mom about. I want her to do like virtual Zoom lessons to teach me recipes.
That would be so awesome. I'm sure she could be a star actually herself on YouTube.
Oh, she could. She could. She was out here a couple summers ago and she was like walking down the strip and she's like, I feel like I could open up a spring roll shop and I would just demolish the competition. And I'm like, yeah, but do you want to open up your own spring roll shop? And she's like, no, but I want to know I could. And I'm like, that's good enough.
We know that. We know that you could.
Yeah. I think that like, I've been very fortunate. And I think that like, sometimes when I look back, I'm like, I've been privileged and I've been lucky enough to have made such good decisions that have led me along the path that have led me on a very positive journey. And I'm hyper aware of that. I'm hyper aware that like, I'm very fortunate to have not had those like tragic or difficult experiences. It's been pretty good along the way. I've had wonderful mentors and I've had wonderful people to shape me. And many of them were my family. And maybe it's just the point of view I'm at now. And I'm sure there's things that I grew up with. Like, as I say this, I'm like, I didn't spend Christmas with my parents for like 8 or 9 years because they always went to Vietnam over Christmas. But that was the only time they could take time off work,
Well,
so
you
I'm like,
can't go in the summer. You'd die.
Yeah. But I'm like, it never bothered me because when they started going, I was like 15. I'm like, yo, you gonna leave me? I got the house to myself? Cool. Yeah. And I'm sure there's negative experiences that have shaped me, but I think for the most part, they've been pretty positive. But I think because of improv, it's literally giving me my whole perception on life and being in the moment, being positive, supporting others' ideas, listening, and then like reacting to like my ideas, my offers. Improv taught me to be like, oh, you feel this? Say it, do it. And because of that, I'm just kind of like, I'm not scared. And one really good example is like when I drive, my wife's like, you're really good at just like turning because you think this way will get us home differently. And I'm like, I know. And she's like, I would never do that. I'm like, because I don't care if we get lost, because I know what's the worst that could happen. Like if we get lost, what's going to happen? The car's not going to blow up, right? But I find
knock on wood for you.
Knock on wood. But I find that that's a really good example of like, I'm just willing to turn and swerve when I need to, just because it feels right. And it's taking me good places.
Well, that's a great message. And I think it's good for youth to hear that too, because I think when you're young, you think every little misstep is going to make your life like it's over, and it's so important for even, I'll bring this up, like suicide prevention, to really have that kind of a mindset, because that you can really get lost and be in a better situation than you were when you started.
Yeah. And my heart goes out to anyone who is struggling with that battle and that constant battle, that never ending battle. Cause it's something that I think people are constantly fighting. And so I've always advocated for the mental health benefits of like improv and comedy. And that's why, like, I think that, like, what I love about improv is that, like, you don't have to take it because you want to get famous. You know, I tell a lot of people, I'm like, oh, you should do an improv class. They're like, well, I'm not interested in being an actor. I'm like, you don't got to be an actor. It's just kind of fun. It's just fun to do. And I think that we should constantly be like looking for those artistic endeavors that we're not, our goal isn't to make it big. And that's my advice for young performers. I'm like, don't try to make it big. Try to make it that you love what you do. Mm-hmm. The big element, the success element will come because of that. Right? So just try to find the thing that you love doing. And so I'm kind of always on the lookout for new things. Like recently, one of my things was like, I want to try to learn the ukulele. I suck at it. I don't have rhythm, but like it brings me joy when I strum, you know?
Sure.
And so I think when we're looking at like suicide and mental health, I think those are things that will help. They're obviously, nothing is going to for sure solve anything.
Sure.
But I think that in those specific areas, I think like those are possible solutions that I advocate for. So especially right now in pandemic, like there are so many wonderful opportunities virtually to take, and so many. Oh, here's what I love: Q&As and like workshops online. Like this is a time for you to improve yourself. And so I've been like sitting in like workshops and Q&As of shows I love. Like I love the show Ted Lasso. Have you watched Ted Lasso?
No, I haven't watched it.
It is so beautiful and positive. In the show I needed in 2020. And I remember I was like in this Q&A, Variety did this Q&A with the cast. They did like a sit down and everyone got to like introduce who they were. And I'm like, oh, my name is Andrew Phung. I'm from Toronto. And the comment below is like, yo, Kimchee is in this group chat. And I'm like, yeah, I love this show. They're like, why are you here? I'm like, because I love good TV. And so it's been an opportunity for me to participate in things that I haven't had the time to do. So take advantage of the time we got right now. And I know the world sucks and like this is really tough right now, but on the bright side, on the few bright sides, just take time for yourself.
I knew very early on that I wanted to be a psychologist. I didn't know the different levels or anything like that, but I knew that there needed to be some kind of a face that you can see yourself and actually say, okay, for a psychologist, just to have my face out there so Asian Americans can maybe feel like they see themselves reflected in the healthcare providers out there. So,
well, mental health is something that I don't think Asian communities talk about enough, you know, and you know, I use my father as an example. Like he's held a lot of stuff to his chest. My mom too. Like I asked my mom years ago, I'm like, how come you don't tell me a lot of stories about Vietnam? And she told me, she's like, because I didn't want to put the pain on you. She says she grew up in such a difficult time in that country. And she's like, I wanted to give you a life in Canada that I didn't have. So why would I give you the pain that I carried with me from childhood? It's like, oh man, right? We don't want to, they didn't want to burden, they not only gave us the life they couldn't have, they did not want to burden us. They held that inside of them because they didn't want to trouble us. And so now it's like me trying to like actively unpack and get that out of them, because as I grow as an adult, hearing those things actually puts a lot of things in perspective. And I don't want my kids to not have that opportunity. Like I want my kids and future generations of children from immigrant grandparents and great grandparents to have those stories, not as a burden, but as a lesson, as things that shape their values, you know? Because I think as I learn more about my parents' story, I complain less and I feel less bad about things because I'm like, you know what? This isn't bad, you know? Yeah. And then for them, it wasn't bad for them. You know, they had it better than the previous generation. But I think the more we can kind of share those stories and deal emotionally with our mental health and our well-being, the better, you know? Absolutely. So it's great that you're the face of this, and it's great we're seeing more stuff reflective of Asian culture.
Well, Andrew, I'll tell you, like, I'll be the face, but I'm not going to come on camera without my eyelashes. So there you go. Well, I wanted to end on a positive note. And because you are the improv king, I wonder if we can play like a 5-6 word association, and you can do that as yourself. And then if you can do it like in a kimchi roll.
Okay, sure.
So we'll go Andrew first. So
Okay.
word association, mental health,
Um, every day,
success,
happiness,
family,
moments,
kimchi, the food,
uh, the flavor,
chips.
the whole bag. The whole bag. I love chips.
Yeah, I know. That's how we bonded on IG of the Cheetos. And I still haven't tried the mac and cheese yet, but I got to find that.
Oh man, I love chips so much. Like that's a danger food for me. That's a
I know.
danger food.
I'm like,
Yeah,
take it
yeah, yeah.
away, take it away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Fun.
Mm, fun. Um, people.
I like that. All right, now is kimchi.
Okay,
Mental
kimchi.
mental health,
Keeping it real.
success,
Uh, success, success. Oh, well, it depends what season we're in. If it was season 1 and 2, it was like laziness. Like, but success in seasons 3 to 5 is just like uh moving up.
and he is family,
Your crew,
kimchi,
spicy.
chips.
The whole bag. Kimchi and I love chips. And I think those are things I brought into kimchi. Like I there was the things that were culturally grounded and then grounded because of his individuality. But then there's things I was like, I get to bring in because like, yeah, Kimchee loves chips. He loves snacks,
Yeah.
you know? So that's been really fun to have, but we bonded over chips. I love chips so much.
And lastly, fun.
Nights out. Yeah. And one of the things I love about Kimchee and Jung is like, it's a portrayal of young Asian men in an urban area, you know, just like two young guys that's trying to make it in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that it's also like I also think it's like a rare relationship on television where it's two young men who are willing to hug and show emotion.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not macho man. It's like they're constantly hugging. They're constantly on the verge of tears.
Yes.
They're constantly sharing their feelings. And I was like, you don't normally see that with male characters on television. And so I love that about their relationship. And so I love that Kim's Convenience has shown young Asian men in this light. But those moments where like they have the party and they're out in the club, like I love that type of storytelling. And this season 5, like there's some stuff that comes up that I was like, yes, I've wanted this episode for 5 years.
That's so awesome. I mean, how was it, just real quick, filming during COVID? Because I mean, you guys had an excellent no infection on set.
Yeah, no infections. The producers and the network and the show worked so hard to put such strict protocols, but it was also on us to follow them. So the actors, the camera team, hair and makeup, wardrobe, the directors. So we worked so hard at enforcing them and following them. And we had a COVID like leader, and she was like a superhero. She'd always be like, "You're standing too close, guys." Like, you know, and she's like, I hate to be the bad guy. And it's like, no, you're not the bad guy. Yeah. We're not listening. And so we finished with no cases. But honestly, like as much as the new world of rehearsing with masks was, all those things, the moments those masks came off, it was like being home again. And so like working with Nicole, who plays Shannon, and Simu and Paul and Jean and Andrea, for those brief moments, it was like, we're back. And it's a testament to how good they are. It's a testament to the bond we've created where we can be in these circumstances, but no matter what, when we strip away what's going on in the world, we are telling the stories of these characters. And I think this season in particular, we worked so hard to make it. And so I think there's so much love in this season. So I think it's the season I'm most proud of. We got through with 0 cases, but the way the set was run was just top notch. I think it's a show we need right now, you know?
Oh yeah. I just wanted more. Like after season 4, I was just like, because it is such a relief to just laugh. And I mean, even if it's the smallest thing or just for a fleeting moment, I think just finding that laughter and, like you said, being in the present is just kind of what we need right now.
And I'm so happy that we're able to bring it. And above all else, we were able to do it to help support the industry and keep our family safe. So the more we can do that, the better. And my heart goes out to anyone affected with COVID right now, or who has dealt with it. It's really scary. And so
Yes.
when we made that show, we didn't take any risks. And I know for me and the main cast, I didn't leave the house outside of going to the van to the studio.
Yeah.
Like for 3 or 4 months, I didn't do anything that would risk a shutdown in production. So we put so much care because we knew it meant so much. So please watch the show, and I hope it brings you joy the way we made it.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Andrew. Any other
Thank you for
projects
having
that you
me.
wanted to promote?
Yeah, but they're all up in Canada.
Well, I mean, you must have virtual stuff that you want to put out there. And, I actually have close friends living in Canada right now. So,
Oh, well, I have a full slate of like radio in the new year. Like I do a lot of like radio podcasts and like CBC radio, Because News, a lot of projects. So that's kind of where I'm at. But right now I'm working on some stuff just on the DL, writing some stuff that I'm really excited about. But more than anything, I'm just so thankful to be put in a position to be pursuing these projects, because it feels like a dream come true that even 5 years ago I could never have imagined talking to someone out in the US on the West Coast who's watched my show and has connected to it. So it literally blows my mind in the best way possible. So I know each year gets bigger and better. So stay tuned. But in regards to the new year, it's like more conversations around mental health, more conversations around the world, more conversations with my son about his emotions and his feelings. And what I love the most is like talking to my son at night of just like, hey buddy, like, how are you feeling? Like, you have any questions about the world? We had one of those last night where I was like, hey man, like, how's school? Like, is there anything you want to talk about? He's like, yeah, I want to talk about this. It's like, let's talk about it. So it's just like having those mental health conversations all year long.
Yeah, that open communication. And it's really encouraging. Actually, my third grader, they're teaching meditation and metacognition and growth mindset. I was like, dang, this is awesome.
Yeah. That's but doesn't as I hear that, sometimes I'm like, yeah, but they're still teaching you math, right? Like,
yeah, I know, but I'm trying to encourage everything, especially for her as a girl. Like, just she's actually really good at math. I suck at math. So I'm just like, yeah, you're on the top, because she's proud of it, not because I want her to become a mathematician. She could be whatever she wants.
And these human beings are going to be so much better than we were, because they will see the world in a different way, and they will have had these conversations. And it sometimes, as far as I've grown as an individual, sometimes I realize the old school nature of an Asian mother in my mind. I was like doing this. There was like years ago, we went to this open house for like an arts academy. Like it was a charter school for our son. We were considering sending him there. And then one of the teachers was like, some days we learn math through dance. And I raised my hand. I'm like, how about you teach math through math?
Did you really say that?
But I think she knew who I was, and it was a joke. But also, it wasn't a joke. Like, are you going to teach math through math? Because I wanted to know math. But it's great that we're having these conversations, and these kids will be such great human beings. And thank you to the teachers who make that happen. They got some tough jobs right now.
They do, yeah.
But yeah, hopefully to another year of open conversations and wonderful mental health.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Like, I feel so honored that you came on the show and made my year, because it's been a rough year, and Kim's Convenience has given so much joy to me and my family. And my kids pop in and out when we're watching it. And they actually recognized Appa in an old movie. We were watching it. I was like, oh man, they must be doing microaggressions. Like, that can't be Appa. And they saw him, and I was like, oh my God, that's Paul. Like,
Paul's got a long list of IMDb movies.
Yes.
He's in a lot of movies.
It was definitely him for sure. But
he looks so different.
Yeah,
he looks so different.
He does.
Looks like a young boy. Like, I was like, whoa, you're a baby. But it's pretty cool seeing him have done those movies, and now he's in the Star Wars universe, and I'm all
I know.
Yeah.
It's so exciting.
Yeah, but thank you for having me. on your
Thank you so
podcast.
much for taking the
And
time.
I don't do many of them, but I love doing ones with this that have like such like a clear perspective and a wonderful message. And if I could share my thoughts on my mental health, and if that helps anyone else, I'm happy. And if you're listening to this and if you ever have any questions, reach out to me over Twitter, shoot me a tweet or an Instagram message, and I'll try my best to respond.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Andrew. And
Thank
I
you.
hope that you have a great rest of the year in 2021.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to the Color Success Podcast. Listen, like, subscribe on all major streaming platforms, YouTube, IG, and if you want exclusive content, you can join our Patreon. All links can be found at colorofsuccesspodcast.com.